Her story's turning into gold. She's taking her power back. Yeah, she's on the rise. Strength in her soul, fire in her eyes. Keeping God first, watch her dreams unfold. Her life's a diamond, breaking the mold. Oh, she's taking her power back. Yeah, she's taking her power back. Harmony.
Welcome to 20 Minutes of Simple Notes from Rita. I am your host on today, and that is RTaylor. Today, our episode is a really good episode. It's profound, and it's something that's really dear to my heart, and it's on mental health and the journey to get there. Our guest is a licensed professional counselor with 20 years of experience working with adults and children, currently working only with adults. She specializes in areas such as depression, trauma, life transitions. And my guest today is none other than therapist Margo Farris.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for joining me. I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's an honor. When you shared with me what you were planning to do with the series, I was very excited for you, obviously. And so when you asked me to be a part of it, I was very, very excited and more than willing to come and speak to your fans and your audience about mental health.
Thank you so much. Yes, mental health is something I think that's very important, and we're kind of hearing a little bit more buzz about it now than what we used to hear about mental health. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, if you could explain exactly what is mental health.
Sure. Okay, so mental health is basically your emotional, psychological, and your social well-being, right? That's essentially what it is. And so when you think about mental health, you can sort of view it as, I guess you could say, an umbrella with those three main components that are sort of over you, right? And so when you think about the emotional and psychological and social well-being, it's essentially affecting how you think. It affects how you handle stress. It essentially affects how you learn, how you make choices, how you learn to exist with others within a community. And so mental health really goes across a spectrum when it's all said and done. So you have those individuals that are mentally stable, I guess you could say, if that's a good way to state that. So you have individuals that have formed healthy attachments. They feel supported and safe within their home, relationships, and community. And then you have other individuals across that spectrum that sort of fit in. And at the end of that spectrum, we sort of see what we consider mental illness. And so it is sort of like a spectrum that goes across, but it's essentially your emotional, psychological, and social well-being. So when you think about your emotional well-being, that is sort of how you experience and manage your feelings, right? Okay. And then when you look at your psychological well-being, those are your thoughts, your beliefs, and your ability to process information. And then when you look at the social well-being, it's your relationship with others and how you fit within your community.
Wow. Thank you so much. Because I don't think sometimes when we hear mental health, I don't think everyone understands it. I didn't, coming from a family that really didn't talk about mental health. Because a lot of people, when you hear mental health, you automatically think the bad.
Yes.
So can you explain to us maybe why there is such negative viewpoints when it comes to mental health, or even just hearing the phrase mental health, people automatically go straight to the negative?
There's definitely a stigma surrounding mental health. And when you think about the various industries that are out there, mental health is sort of the newest one. And so a lot of negativity has been associated with it over the past, just because individuals weren't really trained on how to help an individual that may have been suffering from some type of mental breakdown, right? And so what you saw oftentimes were asylums where, individuals were being locked away because they weren't really sure how to handle some of the breaks that individuals were having over time. So what we're now starting to see is there are still stigmas, there, but what we're seeing is a lot more knowledge from professionals like myself and those before me, where we're able to go in and really truly help individuals work through a lot of the issues that they have. Another major thing that we see surrounding mental health, are the cultural. We see a lot
Yes.
of cultural norms. So if you're brought up in a culture, right, where there isn't a lot of conversation about what mental health is or what it looks like, or there are individuals, within your culture that may think it's witchcraft or, it's the devil. There are a lot of things that, people were brought up, thinking about mental health. And so oftentimes it sort of stays, right? It sort of sticks. Another reason why, you see a lot of issues surrounding individuals as it relates to mental health is they're not really sure if they can trust people,
Yes.
to talk about the issues that they have or things that are going on within their lives, right? That lack of trust, like, will my confidentiality be breached? Will they talk about what's going on with me, with their family at dinner? And I sometimes think, too, there's a lot of things associated with the cost. People aren't really sure that they can afford it. They're not sure whether or not, their insurance, or if they don't have insurance, how will I pay for this? Whether it's short term or long term, will I have the funds to, keep something like this going?
Right.
And again, I just think it's that big stigma. People aren't really clear about what it is. They think, mental health is, someone is, crazy,
Right.
or what's another term that was used a lot? They're touched,
Yeah.
right? And so, with those stigmas and not really having enough information about it, you sort of just take that and run with it. And
Yeah.
so, when you think about, all of those little things, they definitely play into individuals' inability to really truly have an understanding of what it is and how, if they do need support, they can get that.
That's good. And you mentioned the cost. I myself was surprised at how reasonable um, counseling and therapy can actually be. And I believe that has hindered so many people from actually
sure.
reaching out, getting the help that they need, because not only the negative stigma with it, but also what we deem as something that's unaffordable.
And it's absolutely 1000% affordable if you
Yeah.
have insurance, right? But there are a lot of community programs out there where they do offer, services with a sliding scale. You have individuals that are doing their training, right? So they may be associates, licensed professional associates.
Okay.
And so they may not have that higher rate, that they're charging. So it's definitely affordable. But I think, again, it goes back to not really knowing. And I also think, too, that sometimes individuals just don't know where to start, right? They can recognize, I may need help, but I don't even know where to start. Who do I call?
Right.
Or where do I go? Right now, especially since COVID, there are so many options to have services rendered to you, via Zoom or other platforms where you can still get the services that you need at an affordable rate and get this help and support. And
True.
a lot of people just, they're not aware of that.
And it takes courage
For sure.
to pick up the
1000%.
phone to say, hey, I need help. It takes courage. It's nothing wrong with it. Picking up the phone and asking for help. And you mentioned something else, and I think it's going to actually lead us to the next part of what I wanted to bring out was childhood trauma. One of the things you mentioned is communities, culture. And I know in some households you were told not to speak about certain things.
Yes. Yes, we hear and see it a lot within our work. And sometimes we grew up in environments that were similar. You don't tell my business.
Right.
What happens in here, it stays in here. And I think sometimes that because that was your conditioning, growing up, it sort of shapes who you are, right?
Yeah.
And so when you think, I'll give you a perfect example. how many individuals have given their child a speech, right? Before they go into, let's say, a grocery store or a clothing store, right? You know what I'm getting ready to
Right.
say?
Yeah.
You better not ask me to buy you anything. We're just going in here for
Yeah.
this, right? And so as a child, you hear it enough, you sort of take that on, right? And it's like, so you sort of learn to not ask for the things that you need, right?
Yeah.
You sort of become conditioned, even though it's not intentional, even though it's not to cause any harm, right? You're sort of conditioned to keep your mouth closed, not ask for help.
Yeah.
Figure out ways that you can do things on your own because of those small little things that we don't always recognize. And so when you eventually grow up, right, and you're now an adult, you're emotionally dysregulated sometimes. You're dealing with anxiety or fear because mama used to tell us we couldn't ask for anything, when we go in this
Wow.
store.
Yeah.
And so we don't always recognize how our childhood definitely shapes how we show up as adults. And so as an adult, you sometimes sit back and I wonder why, I'm always looking to people please, or
Yeah.
I feel like I can't speak up for myself, or I have low self-esteem. It oftentimes comes from those childhood experiences. And again, there may not be any ill intent
Right.
whatsoever from whoever your caretaker is that's bringing you up, but it definitely sits with you and you don't always recognize that.
Because a lot of what they project on to us is what they were experienced with their parents. And that's good. So I was taught not to ask for anything is what you're saying is in the household maybe, and not with ill intent. So if you're constantly being told, don't ask for anything when you go in the store, don't you ask for anything, period, or whatever, can that lead to hyper independence?
Yes, it absolutely can.
Which
And
is a trauma response,
it's a
which I
trauma
recently
response.
learned.
Yes, absolutely. And you see that in individuals, And one of the other things that we sort of see as we're growing up, and this isn't everyone, right? But we do sometimes see where, you're fine, get up, you'll be all right, stop all that
Yeah.
crying, or, it's not that big of a deal, and again, we don't always recognize it, but that is sort of like the beginning of stifling, our creativity, or, sort of putting a lid on what could be, individuals having an outgoing personality, but, that lid was sort of put on you, again, not
Wow.
intentionally,
Yeah.
but, it sort of puts you in a place where, man, I guess I'm not going to ask, or I won't mention that because it really doesn't matter, and that's how we see individuals that grow up again with emotional dysregulation, anxiety, fear, avoidant behaviors, or they choose to isolate just because it's easier for me to keep it to myself because nobody wants to hear what I have to say anyways.
Because I wasn't able to express myself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That low self-worth, oftentimes you see that, and
My
along
Lord.
with just an inability to trust. I don't trust myself. I don't trust anybody around me. I don't really know what's going to
Yeah.
happen next. So those are some of the signs that we see from that unhealed childhood trauma, right? Those are some of the things that we can see. We may also see individuals that are out there that may self-sabotage and not really recognize that, it's almost like they're trying to get ahead of things so there isn't any disappointment when things don't happen the way that they would like to, or things don't go their way. And sometimes it's, they don't even recognize it,
Yeah,
that they're doing that. Mm-hmm.
It's amazing how it's basic. Everything that we see now,
Mm-hmm.
there is a starting point.
Yeah, 1000%.
Yeah.
It definitely starts somewhere. And so when you think about, man, there were just so many things that happened when I was younger, or there are things that are happening to me right now as an adult, and I just can't make sense of it, right? I don't know why I show up this way. I don't know why I have a difficult time, sleeping or eating, or, I'm always fatigued and exhausted, and tired. These are all signs, right? And so that's where therapy comes in. We sort of help individuals explore, where some of these things that are showing up for them now as adults that, are having an effect on their day to day. Well, let's try and figure out where that sort of
Pinpoint it,
came from,
yeah.
right? Let's talk a little bit about some common themes that we're noticing now, right? From this point in your life up until present. And, really trying to get a true understanding of where, some of these thoughts and ideations that an individual has as an adult, where it came from, and then sort of developing a plan or, gaining skills or tools to sort of work through some of these things or some of the views that we have of ourselves.
And I mentioned earlier that it takes courage to call.
Yes.
It really does, because that's a point of you being vulnerable.
Absolutely.
You're letting the wall down and being able to. So when you come to therapy, or if people come to therapy and they're not willing, have you ever experienced this where they don't necessarily let the walls down?
Yes.
And how do you go about that? Because I did mention, I think I talked about some of your specialties during the introduction, like depression, trauma, self-esteem as well. So when you meet people that come in and they say, hey, I want to get help, I feel like there is something going on, but what part do each individual have in their getting to a place of being better if they're not willing to let the walls down? How do you address that? Do you see it?
Well, you can definitely see the reluctance, right, that an individual may have, right, to open up because, again, they may have trust issues or, they may be dealing with some type of trauma, right, that sort of has these thoughts that sort of run through their heads. So you absolutely 1000% can see it. And there are different modalities that therapists use to work with individuals to ensure that, well, if this particular modality isn't working with them, well, maybe I'll try this. But I tell my clients, when we first start out during intake, the only way that this therapeutic relationship is going to be effective and you'll see results is if that you learn to lower those walls. And I know it can take time, but you have to trust the process. But also understanding, too, that you coming through this door, it isn't, Margo's going to fix me. That's not what that looks like. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of reflection, right? It takes a lot of practicing some of the things that we're discussing. It's not a quick fix. It's not something where you come in, and 3 weeks later, I don't have to see her anymore. I'm good now. I know that I behave this way because something happened when I was 7. That's not what that looks like either. And that's why I think the work that we do is so important. But it's ultimately on the individual, to ensure that they are taking it just as serious as they would anything else. Because if the walls don't come down, what they'll recognize is we're always going to hit a hard place, right? A hard stop and sort of be stuck. So now that we're here, what do we need to do to pivot? Give me a little more, and slowly but surely you'll sort of see that wall come down. But with some individuals, it can definitely take time. It definitely takes time.
Because the trust is very important.
Yes, it's
when
the
it comes to-
foundation of the therapeutic relationship. If you don't trust your therapist enough to be vulnerable, it'll sort of turn into a cycle. A cycle of, oh, well, I did this and it didn't work, or you'll sort of see yourself right back in that starting place that you were in because you're not being transparent.
And you're not, and sometimes they're not ready.
Sometimes they're not.
Yeah,
It's difficult.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
So you have to participate in your own
Absolutely. It's your
healing.
process.
Yeah.
It is your
And I like
healing
that you
process.
said it's not a quick fix. Healing and getting to a place of what I call better looks different for everyone. So, and I don't think you can compare yourself or should compare yourself with what somebody else's journey is. So I want us to be able to talk about, you kind of hit it on it already, what trauma looks like.
Okay.
The signs of trauma. And how it actually spills over into adulthood. So could that be a reason why some people have failed relationships?
Oh, yes, 1000%. Yes, relationship struggles is one of the behavioral signs that you'll see from some type of childhood issues or traumas, right? And so you definitely see relationship struggles and an inability to communicate effectively. That can definitely affect people who have had some type of trauma in their childhood or just not necessarily trauma, just an upbringing that wasn't the best, and they may not have formed, a secure attachment style. And so what you'll see is they may be dismissive, or they may be avoidant, or fearful, and they take that into the relationship with them. And so, someone may say, oh, well, what's wrong, Rita? I'm trying to talk to you. What's going on? Nothing.
Right.
Got it. I'm good.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong. Leave me alone. I said I'm fine.
Right. I see your face, but I'm actually seeing somebody else's.
Exactly. Exactly.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This
You're
has been
welcome.
really good. A lot of information that I know our audience will be able to use. And hopefully you'll be able to reflect and sit down and have just a moment to think and say, hey, do I need to pick up the phone and call a therapist? There's nothing wrong with it. It's nothing embarrassing about it. It's just you actually taking care of what needs to be taken care of. Self-care, self-love.
Yes.
This has been 20 minutes of Simple Notes from Rita. We will have a part 2. Margo is going to be back with us for another episode to continue the conversation on mental health and the journey to get there. Thank you so much. Be blessed.
Oh, she's taking her power back. Yeah, she's taking her power back.